Imagine you're a marine biologist and you've just reached your hand into a tide pool to grab what looks like a small, harmless, rainbow-colored shrimp. It's only about 4 inches long. It has no claws like a crab, no massive jaws like an eel. It looks like something you'd find in a kid's aquarium. And then in less time than it takes you to blink, your hand is bleeding. This is the mantis shrimp, and it just hit you with one of the fastest and most powerful strikes in the entire animal kingdom. Not fast for a shrimp, fast for anything. Its punch accelerates quicker than a bullet leaving a gun barrel. It can shatter aquarium glass. It can crack open the shells of crabs and snails like they're made of paper. And it does all of this with an appendage smaller than your thumb. So how does a creature this small generate force like this? Why did evolution decide that a shrimp needed a weapon that outperforms actual firearms? And what happens to the water itself when this thing throws a punch? Because it turns out the fist isn't even the scariest part. To understand why this animal is so absurd, you first have to understand what a mantis shrimp actually is. Despite the name, it's not really a shrimp, and it's definitely not a mantis. It's a stomatopod, a completely separate branch of crustacean that's been evolving on its own bizarre path for hundreds of millions of years. There are hundreds of species, but the most famous by far is the peacock mantis shrimp, the one responsible for most of the videos of aquarium glass shattering into pieces. They live in burrows in shallow tropical reefs, mostly hiding, mostly waiting. And they come in two basic flavors, spearers and smashers. Spearers have barbed, blade-like appendages built for stabbing soft-bodied prey like fish. But the smashers are the ones that made this animal famous. Because a smasher's arsenal isn't a blade, it's a hammer. The clubbed appendage folds up like a spring-loaded arm, and when it's released, it swings forward so fast that it becomes one of the fastest movements recorded in nature. We're talking about accelerations of over 50 times the force of gravity. For comparison, fighter jet pilots start blacking out somewhere around 9 GDs. A mantis shrimp experiences over 5 times that acceleration every single time it throws a punch, and it does this without breaking its own arm. But here's where it gets genuinely ridiculous. The mantis shrimp's strike moves so fast that it doesn't just hit its target. It boils the water around it. When the club swings forward, it moves fast enough to create something called cavitation. The pressure directly in front of the strike drops so low, so quickly, that the water literally vaporizes for a fraction of a second, forming a collapsing bubble. And when that bubble collapses, it releases a second shock wave, along with a brief flash of light and heat that can reach temperatures close to the surface of the sun. Not hot enough to actually burn anything nearby, since it happens in a microscopic pocket for microseconds, but hot enough that scientists have measured it with real lab equipment and just kind of stared at the data in disbelief. This means the mantis shrimp doesn't actually need to land a direct hit to hurt something. Even if it misses, the cavitation shockwave alone can stun or kill smaller prey. It's throwing 2 punches with one arm, one physical, one made of collapsing water. So why would a creature that lives in a burrow on a reef possibly need this level of overkill? The answer comes down to what it's actually trying to eat. Mantis shrimp go after some of the most heavily armored prey on the reef: snails, crabs, clams, and other creatures wrapped in thick calcium shells that are specifically built to resist being crushed. Most predators can't be bothered to deal with that kind of armor and go for softer prey instead. But the mantis shrimp decided the correct evolutionary response to armor was not find easier food. It was build a weapon strong enough to make the armor irrelevant. Over millions of years, this turned its clubbed appendage into one of the most efficient impact tools in the natural world. The club itself isn't just dense, it's engineered. It has a layered, twisting internal structure, kind of like microscopic plywood, that spreads out the stress of each impact so the shrimp doesn't shatter its own weapon while it's busy shattering something else's shell. Materials scientists have actually studied this structure directly because it's more crack-resistant than most industrial ceramics, and it's inspired new designs for body armor and impact-resistant materials used in aerospace engineering. So this thing is basically punching with a fist that human engineers are trying to reverse engineer. But how does this actually compare to something like a bullet? Because that's the comparison that made this animal famous in the first place. A typical handgun bullet leaves the barrel at around 720 miles an hour. The mantis shrimp strike reaches similar peak speeds in the water, which is an environment roughly 800 times denser than air. Moving that fast through something that dense is like throwing a punch through wet concrete and still winning. To put it another way, if a human could scale up a mantis shrimp strike to our size and strength, we'd be able to punch straight through steel. And here's the part that should be terrifying. If you're a crab, the mantis shrimp doesn't need to hit you in a vital spot. It just needs to hit you once. The force alone is often enough to instantly crack a shell that took the prey its entire life to build. But surely something this violent has some kind of drawback. And it does. All of this force comes at a cost, because the shrimp's own club takes a beating every single time it strikes. Over its lifetime, the club actually accumulates microscopic damage, and mantis shrimp periodically molt their entire exoskeleton, including the club itself, essentially rebuilding their weapon from scratch every few months. Imagine if your fist just wore out from punching too hard, and your body had to regrow new ones. There's also the fact that this weapon isn't just for hunting. Mantis shrimp use the exact same strike in territorial fights against each other, and this creates a strange evolutionary standoff. Two mantis shrimp fighting over a burrow could genuinely kill or maim each other with a single hit. So over time, many species have developed a kind of ritual combat instead, where they'll strike each other's armored tail sections, called telsons, which are specifically reinforced to survive these blows without lethal damage. It's less fight to the death and more test of strength, similar to how some animals wrestle instead of using their most lethal weapons on each other. Which raises the question, if this animal is this well armed, does anything actually hunt it? Surprisingly, yes. Mantis shrimp are ambush predators, but they're not immune to becoming prey themselves. Larger fish, octopuses, and other mantis shrimp are all threats, and their solution isn't really to fight everything that comes near them. It's to stay hidden. Most of their life is spent tucked inside burrows, only coming out to strike when the odds are firmly in their favor. Even the most overpowered weapon in the ocean doesn't help much if you're not smart enough to know when not to use it. But there's one more layer to this animal that makes it even stranger, and it has nothing to do with punching. Mantis shrimp have what might be the most complex eyes of any animal on Earth. While humans see color using 3 types of receptors, mantis shrimp have up to 16. They can detect ultraviolet light, infrared light, and polarized light, which is a type of light most animals can't perceive at all. Scientists still aren't entirely sure why they evolved this level of visual complexity, since some studies suggest their brains might not even process all that information the way you'd expect. It's possible their eyes are simply built to detect things instantly rather than analyze color in detail. Kind of like a visual trigger system paired perfectly with an animal that only has a few milliseconds to decide whether to strike. So when you put it all together, you get an animal that can see wavelengths of light invisible to almost everything else, that carries a weapon capable of matching the acceleration of a bullet, and that can boil water with a single strike, all packed into a creature smaller than a human hand. It's easy to look at the ocean and assume the most dangerous things are the biggest ones, the sharks, the whales, the giant squids. But the mantis shrimp is proof that size was never really the deciding factor. Sometimes the most overbuilt weapon in the entire ocean belongs to something you could hold in the palm of your hand and would probably still regret picking up. Thanks for watching. And if you want to see a video about an animal that's the exact opposite, something enormous that gets its power purely from size, check out our video on why giant squids are terrified of swordfish.